if I say it's society that, like, you know, in the case of the parents fucking up and not being good parents and like being responsible guardians, you would say community because like anarchists don't like the state. I really don't see a functional difference in terms of, say, the community like compulsing kids or like taking kids like out of the homes of like bad or irresponsible parents to make sure they have access to like that super awesome school that, like, again, sounds really fucking cool. In the same way that I would have, there would be like a state that would remove kids from households where the parents don't care about their education. I think there's compulsion somewhere, and I agree that I want to like reduce the compulsion as much as possible. But at some point, like, there's still like that compulsion there, and like what I've been arguing with, or what it seems I've been arguing with, is anarchists say there should be no coercion or compulsion at all. But even like the awesome idealized, or not idealized, like the awesome like IRL example that you gave, still has like implicit levels of compulsion. And I know you said like coercion is the last resort, but again, I agree with you. I'm not saying we like, you know, like just black bag kids and like drop them off at school. Like, you should ask them first. But like,
I was really frustrated with the framing of anarchism being about, or like the fundamental principle of anarchism is no coercion. I think that's a really silly and not not a good way to understand anarchist philosophy. Like,
that's fine. I would recommend you take it up with other anarchists then, because there's a lot of them who like thinks that like the Gaudian, like I recommend you have a very long chat with Demon Mama about that.
I mean, you know, I wanted to have a chat with Riverboat Jack about it, but she describes herself as a libertarian socialist. Tell me what the difference between a libertarian socialist and an anarchist is. I'll listen. But
it's like, just someone who wants to make the same arguments that they get mad when you call them an anarchist. I don't know. Like that was.
I mean, I just don't think she's explored anarchism as a philosophy all that much, so she doesn't want to claim that label. But just on my point, right? I think viewing it as no coercion, we are coerced by everything.
Wallander,
right?
no, as long as they comply with Twitch
the
TOS.
fact that hunger
they're
exists
fine.
is a coercive influence, right? We can't eliminate all coercive influences within society. Anarchism is about trying to eliminate unjust hierarchical structures, right? Because we believe, and I think
I agree with that principle. I also want to get rid of unjust hierarchical structures. I think that's like a super awesome like thing. But again, I think there's, and it seems like you agree that there are some just hierarchies. In the case of, say, like an expert, like teaching someone who knows like less about a subject, because I think that's like a very like a big example of a just hierarchy. Like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yes, in a way. So in certain situations, it can be justified that one person gives another person orders, right? I usually, because I can't actually even think of a better example off the top of my head that's really easy for the layperson, I just say, like, if you want to build a house, somebody has to tell you where to put the bricks, right? We're not all fucking architects. So, and that makes sense, right? But the idea that architect should be held in much greater regard by society, or that they should be able to tell you what you should do when you're not putting bricks around, or that you should be forced to go and lay those bricks even if you think that it's probably not a good idea to have a house there, or there's so many other ways in which, like, the power of that hierarchical relationship could be extended that would make it unjust.
I think I'm making an argument for that in any way, shape, or form. I don't think, like, we haven't even like really touched on unjust hierarchies, like in like the purpose of this debate. Yeah. So it's like, and again, like, that's fine. Like, if we want to like reduce, like, say, like the pull that doctors and like lawyers have in society compared to, like, say, plumbers or, you know, like bricklayers, like, I'm totally fucking down for that. You know, mad respect to the people who like do like all that sort of work. That's not. Well, I think like the argument here. So and again, like,
I think when kids when they look at schooling, that's what they're arguing about, though. They're basically saying that this hierarchical structure is not necessary for the job that needs doing, and I would agree with that in some circumstances.
But what about the circumstances where you disagree with that? Because then I feel like that's a very like weird hedge where it's like, what are the circumstances in which you agree that it's necessary? And because if you agree that some portions of, like, say, like education, because I'll stop saying schooling because people get mad at me. I don't, bookfucker, I love you, buddy. I mean education. I don't mean schooling. But so what I mean is if you're okay with it to some degree, because I've had some anarchists tell me this, they're like, oh, like, what about just like, say, mandatory education for, like, so just like K through 5th grade? I'm like, that's fine, but then we're arguing about the degrees of the compulsory education. We're not arguing about whether it needs to be compulsory or not. That's not the question. If I can get you to tacitly agree that there should be some level of coercion that like gets kids to that gets kids like to get an education, then like we're just like we're at that point we're arguing over the best way to like fix or improve our education system. We're not talking about whether it's like compulsory or not. And that's like I feel like that's a I don't know if that's like a yeah I don't want sorry go ahead.
Yeah, my frustration with the conversation, I think, is that there are.
What do you mean I look like a scuffed Ned Flanders?
I totally had what I was going to say when you were halfway through your sentence, and then by the time you finished,
the fuck was that?
Oh yeah, that's it. So so it's really important talking about the hierarchy and saying like, is the hierarchy necessary for the job that needs doing? The job that needs doing is like educating the child, right? And I don't think that we have explored the ways in which we could educate the child without that hierarchical structure being pleasant to a satisfactory degree to determine that having that hierarchical system present is the only way in which that child will be educated. It should be that hierarchy should only exist if there's no other option.
Future pay me.
Right?
I think right now they're both right now and in the hypothetical future, I don't see an option. I'll bite this bullet right now, Viv. I'll bite it for all the anarchists listening. If it turns out that if we make the school like as poggers as possible and kids like end up just choosing it over everything else, I'll completely say I was fucking wrong. I'm sorry. Like you were right. I was wrong. I just can't imagine. But it goes back to like.
I know you can't imagine it, but that's where my frustration came in with the studies and stuff. I was saying that I think there is evidence to suggest that we can create these kinds of schooling structures that like incentivize, and not just the schooling structures, but like the way we act towards children and how we care for them in the broader community can incentivize them to make the decision to educate themselves, right, rather than forcing them to go into the school. And I don't think they're at a
Dilly,
boarding
Ockley
school.
neighbor.
I feel like we forced them into that situation, like at some level. Like I feel like you're playing very fast and loose with like what you're like accepting in terms of like what's coercion, you know, or like what's like we stuck them in a boarding school. I don't think they're allowed to like escape. Like if they leave, they'll be put back. So, like that's a level of coercion, right? Like
oh diddly okay,
I
neighbor.
completely fucking agree. Like I said, like I'm not trying to black back kids.
Yeah, you're on coercion, and I'm just. I mean, I guess they're kind of intrinsically tied together, but I'm just on hierarchical structures. I don't think. I think it's probably necessary, like I said at the start of the conversation, that a child is placed into the guardianship of an adult, right? I think that like kids could fucking run into the road and hurt themselves or some shit, right? Like some fucking toddler. You are not gonna let that toddler just like run around outside by themselves. They're gonna fucking eat some glass or roll around in dog shit or get hit by a fucking car. We recognize that, right? And so boarding school,
but in the case of the school, right? It's like whether it's the parents forcing them, or whether it's the anarchist community forcing them, or whether it's the government forcing them, like in a non-anarchist society. Like someone's still forcing the kid to go at some point. Again, as long as we can create like
I don't see a fundamental difference between a boarding school and somebody who lives next to a school, right? That's like I grew up in a fucking children's home with a school on site. It's like, you know, the school, if you don't have to attend the school, you might as well just be living next to a school that you never go to. I don't agree that we're forcing the kid to go to school. I don't think that's mandated schooling. It meets the standard of mandated schooling for the government because they're there, they're not truant.
I saw RTBA.
Right? But they don't have to engage with any educational activities.
We
and
have
like
the
you said, it's about
reason?
education. If a child is not engaging with any educational activities, they're not really at school, right?
You could say they're not engaging in any educational opportunities, but again, like I think we like just moved right past they can't leave the premises. If they are, they will be returned. And even though they can do all the fun activities,
they can just go sit in their room.
And I get that they can do all the fun activities there, but like they're still massively incentivized. So there's both like the coercion of them like not being really allowed to leave. They have to play like accepted things on the premises. And again, if there are these kids in school, you said they have to meet like certain educational levels. So again, it doesn't seem like any of those kids, or they're incentivized strongly enough.
The individual. The individual child doesn't have to attain a specific educational level. What I said was that like schools in the UK should get shut down if they're not providing satisfactory education to their students, and the way that that is determined is like what is the educational attainment as a generality of students in the school, and it seems that they attain the sort of same standards as people in the United Kingdom. The individual child doesn't really have any impetus on them to engage with this sort of stuff.
Okay.
From like a mandatory state level.
I'm gonna need to step in because I don't want this to be the same debate I just went through for the past hour and a half.
Okay, can I just make one point before you do?
Yeah, I guess.
I just don't think there's any fundamental difference between sitting in your bedroom at a boarding school, right? And playing video games, and living next to a school in your neighborhood and sitting in your bedroom and playing video games. I don't.
Okay,
I don't
so
agree
do
that these are the same
like
thing. I don't think.
I have just one question. Do you know whether or not they have access to like the internet inside of their rooms?
I do not, off the top of my head. No.
Do you know? Okay. Because like what could be the case is they're just all going to class because there's nothing to fucking do in their rooms.
Yeah, that would be a cool way to incentivize kids to go to school. It's not like overly coercive.
It's still taking away all their shit.
Yeah.
Like you can't say that you don't want to force kids to do stuff, and then you say like eventually we'll just start removing all the options until all you have left is school.
Yeah.
At that point, just make them go to the fucking school. Like I'm really sorry. Like I feel like this is just coercion with extra steps. This is just a mandate with extra steps. Like we're gonna wait a little bit longer, and we're gonna take away all their games first until they have nothing but blocks, and eventually when there's
everything is coercion. Incentive is coercion. That's why I said I don't like framing it as coercion. But
okay,
yeah.
but like.
Okay, it's pretty coercive. Like just saying that whatever is like just saying, hey, you're gonna have literally no ability to do literally anything but breathe oxygen, drink water, and eat like rations until you go to school.
Well, what it
like,
says is they can play as much as they like. I would just like.
Who are they gonna play with if all of their other kids that want to not eat rations are in school during the school time?
Eat rations.
Okay, you know what I'm being dramatic, but you know what I mean. Like, if you don't have, there's some pretty important details being left. I don't want to go back over this for another 30.
What the school says is that kids are allowed to play as much as they like. All I'm saying is we should probably look into these studies more and see if there's like a better way to do these things. That's all. And I felt like those studies and a more interesting conversation about how schooling is structured.
Spotted, dude.
Like, couldn't be had because it was just all screaming about like coercion and fucking kids Robloxing themselves and shit.
I mean, but those things are important, and like, Viv, it seems like you're not in the same boat as that. But do you understand why it's frustrating when Demon Mama exploded and refused to answer the question about like whether the state should be able to stop a kid from Robloxing themselves? And in the same way that Jack refused to engage with the question of whether the state should stop a child from Robloxing themselves after saying that it's okay.
SpongeBob reference in New York.
In the case of a 4-year-old, and then she rage quit the conversation. So like, I'm really sorry that I was aggro to Jack during that. But like, if you are unwilling to answer those questions and like bite the bullet on certain hypotheticals,
I think the conversations. Yeah, I think the question's fucking stupid, but but it'd be very easy for me to answer. It's like I would prefer that the community.
I don't care what you prefer. I'm asking, should a higher power stop the kid from doing that if like the parents are inept? If you say yes, then I don't care if it's a community watch. I don't care if it's the government.
Exactly.
Someone's got to stop the kid. If we agree on that fundamental thing, then we agree. And I'm sorry for being like mean to Jack. Like, but that's like, you know, I don't care if it's the community anarchist council or whether it's the government.
Nobody wants children killing themselves. I think Jack tried to introduce some nuance into the situation where we're talking about like cases of euthanasia or whatever, which are like carefully considered over long periods, blah, blah, blah. And that's why they were like, in some situations, maybe, right? And I think that that's also fine. But
I agree with that. I'm in, like, to be completely clear, I'm in favor of like physician-assisted suicide. But what I'm not okay with is like someone looking me in the eye and I say, hey, this kid lost a kickball game. They're 4 years old. Should we let them Roblox themselves? And then someone says like, I can't answer that question because that, or like maybe we should because that's coercion. Because like stopping them would be coercive. Like
the answer is no. The answer is no. It's so easy. The answer is no. No, we shouldn't let that kid do that.
So I was right, and Demon Mama and Jack are both wrong on that point.
I don't think that's how Jack answered.
What the question was, but
Look, I think Jack was trying. I think Jack was trying to introduce more nuance into the conversation because the question is kind.
No, I got this one doing a joke. I'm sorry. I was so.
I think Jack was trying to introduce more nuance into the conversation because the question is kind of innate. Right? But I understand your frustration. Yeah.
I don't think it is. I don't think it's innate. Like I think if you tell me that you aren't okay with, like, say, government doing X, and then I give you a hypothetical and like as an example of like the government like not being able to do X and the consequences of that, I don't think that's unfair. In the same way that when someone says we should, like, you know,
again, as an anarchist, right, or as like most reasonable libertarian types, right, you would have to say something along the lines of, I would prefer that it wasn't that we had to have the state do it, but sure, the way society is currently structured, that is the only option, and so yeah, the state should absolutely step in.
But not even like in the way that's currently structured. I'm talking about future society, right? Whether it's like if we're an anarchist like society, then like I'd still prefer like the community council to step in. Like, and like it's not even just like it's not a present thing. I'm asking, like, even like in the ideal society, like would we have a higher power in the case that the parents like are deadbeats, stop the kids from, like, you know, harming themselves? I think that's a very easy slam dunk, and you answered that, and that's awesome. But like some of them did not because either they didn't want to bite the bullet on like a bad hypothetical during a conversation, or like they like stuck themselves to like the wrong thing. And again, like at this point, I don't think your issue's with me because it seems like you're okay with some coercion, whether it's incentives or something else. And so like I would tell you to go like pick some bones with some libertarian socialists, some anarchists, tell them to stop being so fucking bad at arguing. Like,
I think a lot of people on this platform are really, really bad at like presenting anarchism. Yeah, I'll give you that. That frustrates the hell out of me because
that's all right.
I you know, regardless of what Relly thinks, I think I can present it, but I have to constantly.
Well, that's what I want to get to.
Trying to get me to like talk about my perfect utopia.
I'm not trying to get you to hold up. Wait, am I muted?
No, not you specifically. I'm just saying in general. Like that's 90% of the conversations I have. I care about in your ideal society. I don't care about that.
Well, no, that's incredibly important. That's what I was going to talk to you about after you were done with Hanz. Like, I think being able to, I think you saying, well, I don't really have a endgame solution to these things is a really big issue, because then you don't know what the fuck you're working towards. That's the problem.
No, I have a moral philosophy, and there are some things that I can say are incongruent with that moral philosophy, right?
No, like, the issue is if you don't understand where that moral philosophy will take you, i.e. your ideal society, then why should I ever follow any of your moral prescriptions? You can say this feels wrong, this feels right, because we're moral relativists. That's what we mean when we talk about things are good and bad. This feels good, this feels bad, ultimately, right? And you could say that until you're blue in the face, but if you have no understanding of where those conclusions will lead you down the road, then it is completely absent of any kind of understanding.
I can answer that very easily in that we would say that oppression is born out of unjust hierarchies, right? Someone having power over another and the ability to infringe upon their autonomy in unjust fashion.
Okay,
right?
Vivian, if the alternative to what you consider to be an unjust hierarchy is something that you cannot explain late game in time or later down the road, then why would I ever consider that to be a viable alternative to the hierarchy that currently exists?
Because again, I'm not proposing a broader society. I'm proposing a moral philosophy that I believe will take us to a better society.
So you misheard me, because that's the issue I am getting at. If you cannot propose me a society that could stem realistically from your moral philosophy, why would I ever believe that your moral philosophy is viable in the first place?
I can provide you.
There's a lot of holes in it. Like,
I don't think. I don't think that you can describe your society in every, your ideal society in every aspect. If I say, hey, really, what's your perfect society, or what's the ideal society going to be like, and you say, you draw a vague picture of what it's going to be like, and I say, well, how would this one specific thing work, and then start pointing out all the fucking problems I have with that one specific thing, this is not a productive conversation.
No, Vivian,
and it doesn't work.
I don't know, Vivian,
I can tell you things that
no.
ought to exist and ought not to exist in an ideal society, but I can't tell you exactly who's going to take the rubbish out and why and when.
Vivian, that's not what anyone is asking for when they ask you for these things. That's not, we're talking about very simple and basic things like, how is your economic system going to work without money? That seems like a really important thing to have an understanding about when you're talking about abolishing money. What system is going to replace it?
I'm not
talking about like, hey, who are going to be the people that maintain the light fixtures on street lights? It's what are you going to do when there's no more money, when you eliminate money? That is like, you need to have that in line. I'm not asking you for the minutia of like who collects she shells by the seashore, whatever that fucking shit that I can't pronounce, right? Nobody, I'm not
seashells by the seashore. You're
fuck you,
welcome.
Hans. I'm gonna ban you. Okay, you're gone. You're gone. All right, I'm done with you. I'm done with you. Okay, I'm done with you. Okay.
I appreciate this. I don't want to take up any more time to have like the same debate. Viv, I really appreciate the based anarchists stopping the 4-year-olds from Robloxing themselves. I'm sorry for being mean to Verbocheck. I'm not sorry for anything else. Have a great night, Rella. I love you. Dad, say goodbye to everybody. Say bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Dad.
You're on thin ice, Hans. Thin ice. Thin ice.
Goodbye.
All right. So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
When we're talking about, okay, so yeah, that's what I mean. I don't disagree with you that like you talking to me about, again, the seashells, I might not have an answer for you.
You asked me how would somebody do taxes, and I laughed.
Yes.
Because we're talking about like a broad range of potential hypothetical societies in which maybe there isn't any tax, maybe there is tax, maybe there's money, maybe there's not money.
Is there tax in your... I think taxation is a incredibly like baseline thing you should have an argument for whether or not it exists, okay? I'm not telling you specific tax policy. I'm just asking you, how is a person going to do their taxes? And your response was, maybe there isn't going to be tax because maybe there isn't going to be money. And that kind of a big thing, you're going to need to justify that with a separate system. And when I ask you, okay, how is it going to work without taxes? You can't go, whoa,
So,
I don't have the answers to everything.
An anarcho-communist is going to say there's not going to be any money in the ultimate
cool.
ideal
I'm
society.
talking to you. I'm not talking to a nebulous anarcho-communist. I'm talking to mixed Vivian Wulf. That's who I'm talking to.
Okay. Well, if, mixed Vivian Wulf is not sure what the ideal society is.
That's great.
The only thing I'm sure about is that I say sure. When I say sure, I don't mean 100% certain, but pretty convinced of.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about right now then. You, as a person, all right? I'm not talking about the nebulous anarchist. I'm talking to you. If you are incapable of giving me any of your prescriptions for what society should do post-money or whether or not there should be money or anything like that, and you're just following a vague idea of principles that you might have, then why should I hold that in any regard at all? Because as a utilitarian, I care about I care about the outcomes of our principles, right? I apply the reason why I have any of the principles I have is because I believe they lead to a good society. If what you're telling me is you have these principles, but you don't know what society it's going to lead to, because when I ask you, you don't have any answers to what your society is going to be, then why should I ever listen to you?
But you're trying to push me on the money. Okay, so
I'm trying to push you when I'm asking what system would exist besides taxes? I don't think that's a wild question to ask.
If you want to ask me about the fucking money thing, what I would say is that there are some things that are fundamentally axiomatically opposed to the principles of anarchism. I would say capitalism is one of them. So the accruing of private property is one of them, right? Because it sets up unjust hierarchies, creates oppression, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but
right? And so any monetary system that eventually evolves out of this would have to be one in which I would say maybe luxury goods can be traded and bartered for, but necessities ought be provided as needed.
Okay, so if I can poke holes in your system of a barter system, right? then do you agree that it might not be a viable alternative to like our current system, and that you might want to drop it? And that when I ask questions about it and then you don't have answers about it, it might actually be indicative
Go ahead,
of
press
you
me
not.
then. Press me on what I just said.
Okay, so how the fuck am I gonna buy goods, acquire goods from a separate individual?
Luxury goods or necessary goods?
Luxury goods, like an iPhone.
Things that aren't necessary for your survival. I would want the community to democratically decide how those are distributed. I don't think that they're essential.
What? So we have to vote for who gets iPhones?
You could vote on the method of acquiring an iPhone, right?
No. Once the iPhones are acquired, let's say there's 10. Okay? There's 10.
No. Acquiring, getting, right? You could vote on the method of getting an iPhone. So you could, for instance, decide as a community, right? We have this many resources to put together, okay? And we want some iPhones to be produced, right? Who gets those iPhones? Maybe we don't have enough money to produce enough resources to produce enough iPhones that everybody gets one. So who gets one of these particular luxury goods? Well,
is my microphone better now,
different ways in which you could sort that out. You could do first come, first serve. You could do some kind of barter thing where you're like, well, anybody who has another luxury good that somebody else wants could give away that luxury good and receive an iPhone in response, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, as a community,
okay, so hold on. So
decide how these things are distributed.
Yeah, so there's a lot of problems. There's a reason why we use currency, all right? There's a reason why the barter system fucking sucks, okay? For a lot of shit. Okay? What if I
mean, neither of those were even barter
okay,
systems,
what yeah, you did. You just said a barter system where you trade one luxury good for another. Did you not?
No, a barter system would be you giving a luxury good to a person who then gives you something in return.
You just said that, though.
No. What I said was, right, you could vote that if people want an iPhone, they have to give away another luxury good to somebody else who needs it. It's not necessarily
that's called barter.
Holy fuck! It's not barter if you're like, you give away a luxury good to like your next door neighbor, and then Fred, who lives down the street, gives you an iPhone. You haven't bartered.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that like if you give a phone to somebody else, people are gonna give you a different phone out of the kindness of their heart, or just like as a deal?
No, I'm saying that the resources of a community are communally owned, and therefore you democratically decide how those resources are to be distributed. Now, I think
that's not what I meant. How do I, as a member of a community of 100, acquire an iPhone if there are 10?
However, the community of 100 decides to distribute those iPhones. Luxury goods, the community can decide how they ought to be distributed, right? And there's a number of different ways that you could do that, all of which I think fit within the moral framework of anarchism. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so what I'm saying is those systems suck, okay? How am I supposed to get... yeah, like literally. How am I supposed to get...
Maybe you do it through money, really. Maybe you say, hey,
okay, I'm asking you. I'm not...
works the most,
Vivian, you understand... No, Vivian, you understand. You are literally jumping between massive moral positions. You're like, well,
no,
maybe you're like... No, you're playing hopscotch. Vivian, you're playing hopscotch between having a society with money versus having a society with only barter trade. Those are you can't just go like, you know what, today I'm actually feeling like the ideal society has money. You know what, today I'm actually feeling like the ideal society has barter trade. It's not something you just hop between.
It wouldn't be money as we understand it now. The accumulation of capital creates these unjust hierarchical structures. But if you want, I just wanted to avoid going down the fucking road of saying bullshit like labor vouchers or whatever dumb fuck cringy.
Sure, we can talk about any fucking thing. No, what do you want, Vivian? I am not talking to a tanky. I'm not talking to anybody else. Okay, I'm talking to you. What do you want in your society?
I literally just said.
Okay.
I literally just said, I do not care how we decide who gets the iPhones, right? as long as it's done fairly democratically, because I don't think iPhones are something that's going to substantially help or decrease somebody's fucking
I call
quality of
bullshit,
life.
because I think this is a paradox. If everybody decides democratically then that anarchism is trash because they're based, then are you cool?
If everybody decides that you can't, okay.
Yeah, everybody says we like the hierarchies that currently exist. Anarchism is for idiots, and they just like, fuck that. Anarchism's for literally low IQ people. Like, what do you do?
Okay, so I don't want to force anybody into a fucking into the system of anarchy.
I'm asking, would you say that they're wrong?
Right. I mean, I would say that they're wrong.
Okay, so then you're using a separate. So then stop. So then stop, please.
Wait, why are you stopping me halfway through?
Because I'm getting so frustrated because you go off on rants. This is like a mini Richard Wolff situation.
You asked me a stupid fucking question that requires a shitload of explanation because you want me to say yes or no.
It really does. Okay, Vivian, whether or not people who democratically disagree, when you tell me that your fundamentals are people ought to decide democratically what they want to do with their lives, and that's the fundamental thing, and I tell you that they think that all of your ideology is absolute dog shit democratically, and you say that you think that they're wrong, okay, so what I'm asking you then is, it's very simple, that's a simple question, with a simple
the very simple answer, which I was trying to give as you interrupted me, right, was I don't want to force people into anarchism. If they want to vote themselves into some other fucking system, then sure. As long as democracy is preserved, I think that's the most important thing. I don't think that we should ever be able to vote out democracy because then you can never vote it back in again. But beyond that, I don't give a I don't give a I don't want to force people into anarchism. That's why I advocate for pragmatic steps towards changing the philosophies of people, outgrowing leftist institutions, and creating a more cooperative society that eventually leads to anarchism. Right? Or leads to some kind of anarchist society. That's why I talk about anarchism as a philosophy, not as an ideal society. It's the whole point of this conversation, and why I get so frustrated.
And I'm trying to have a conversation with you about how that's useless. That's not a utilitarian way of looking at things.
It's incredibly
no, it's incredibly useless. That's how you make decisions is in relation to your philosophy and its congruence with how it affects the world. You can't just say I have a philosophy and a way of thinking. It's like why? Why do you have those philosophies? So let's begin there.
Because I have certain moral axioms.
Okay.
Right?
No, Vivian. No, Vivian. Why are those moral? Why do these positions about unjust hierarchies come about? Why do you even think that that is a good thing to hold?
How far back do you want me to go? To
you could just go to feudalism. Accept Richard Wolff as your Lord and Savior. Just go all the way back to feudalism. I'm ready for it.
The ANCAPs onto feudalism, but what I said. So why do I have those positions?
Yeah, why those positions?
Because I'm broadly a utilitarian.
Okay, and do you know what utilitarians do with their moral prescriptions? They have them based off of the outcomes of what they believe those moral positions will lead to.
Yes, and my outcomes are either greater autonomy and well-being, or less autonomy and well-being. Okay. In fact, I would put autonomy into the category.
So, Vivian, in the society that you envision as a result of your philosophy, what does it look like? That's all I'm asking. As a utilitarian, you believe that the consequences of your philosophy leads to a specific society that is great. What does that society look like? That's all I'm asking.
As a utilitarian, I believe that if we make decisions to cause less suffering and increase well-being, then we'll eventually get to a better society. That is fundamentally what I'm saying.
No, that is you understand a Nazi could say that, Vivian. You understand that, right? So what does it look like? Right. And so what does it look like? What is your stop, Vivian? What if I say that what if everybody democratically agrees that anarchist philosophy doesn't lead to it's similar to like Nazi shit. All right, let's go with an extreme shit. That like people consider anarchists and Nazis on the same level of like repugnant for like upholding moral freedoms. How are you going to make the argument that your society, that anarchist principles lead to, will result in more freedom? How do you make that argument? Show me that society. Show me the outcomes of your philosophy. That's what I'm saying. You can't just say, well, my philosophy believes in getting rid of badness and excelling at goodness. You can't say that. You need to show me what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, Hanz Ahrelevant has got it right. If we do the good society, it'll be gooder.
Well, he's because he's fucking God-sitting right now. That's absolutely what the fuck is happening. You're saying,
holy fuck.
Like, because you're engaging with the chat. You're not engaging with me. These very simple questions.
Engaging with you.
Okay, hold on. What question? Okay, go ahead.
You were asking me, can people vote out anarchism? I said yes.
No.
Right, we got somewhere.
Okay, that's not what I just asked you. What I just asked you is, right, if a group of people say, hey, anarchist ideas lead to the same conclusions as Nazi ideas, how do you prove them wrong?
By instituting them elsewhere and having a better society than a Nazi society, and probably by kicking the shit out of the Nazis.
So, Vivian, what does that society look like?
It looks like one in which everybody's vote is fucking counted. It looks like one in which private property doesn't exist, right? Because it sets up unjust hierarchies. It looks like one. Well, I'm sorry, you're rubbing your head. What? I'm sorry. Okay, really, what's your ideal society?
My ideal society is one in which people have the availability to own private business and private corporations, as well as co-ops to be able to be established. Individuals can have maximized freedom relative to what I consider to be maximized freedom, being like not what is it called, negative freedoms or positive? I forget which is which. Like essentially, I think that people have a right to be able to defend themselves. I would like to be able to have the right to be able to bear arms, but I think people are pretty stupid for that. So maybe society will lean towards that. If people want to be able to hoard a bunch of wealth, they have the availability to do so. I want to be able to institute high taxes. That way people could tax away the gains from some people that might not have all of their money be like incredibly critical to their well-being and stuff like that, to fund social projects for most of the people in the world. I want to be able to have a strong welfare state so that way I can support poor people or people who are disenfranchised. I want a state that upholds anti-discrimination laws through state force. I want state violence to be, I want there to be a monopoly on violence by the state, but have severe oversight by the democratic community as a whole, meaning the voter base and the voting populace as a whole, right? These are all actual answers, all right? What you said to me is you want every vote counted. That's what you started with.
What? I started listing, and you started shaking your head and fucking going, oh my God, right? Like, by the time I'd got to 2 points. How many points did you just list off there, really?
I don't know, like 20? No, but the thing that the reason why, hold on, the reason I listed off those points is those are actually, what you said is you wanted every vote counted. You want unjust hierarchies gone. These are platitudes. That's what they're called. I need you to show me the society you want. And I think when I ask you an incredibly pointed question about, does taxes exist in your society?
I literally said the opposite to one of your points, really. I said I don't want the private ownership of the means of production, right? Like,
sure, I consider
one of your points.
I consider that a point, but when I'm asking you questions about whether or not money exists in your society and you're in a state of superposition about that, you can't have that. That's not something that can happen. You can't just be like, well, you know what? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe. Like, that's a really big fucking issue with cascading consequences.
Money, as currently conceived of, probably cannot exist in a society wherein we have no unjust hierarchies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's what is your solution to an alternative to money?
Fuck, man. It's frustrating because there's a bunch that would be acceptable, and you're just going to be like, oh, well, you can't tell me the perfect one.
No,
so your idea
it's not. So I understand you have this position where you think everybody that's attacking your positions are saying you have to have a perfect philosophy. Nobody in the world is saying that. Maybe you met one bad conservative one time and it triggered you or what have you. But the reason why we ask these things,
everybody
hold on,
does this.
Vivian, simple. Okay. If you are complaining about an issue, is it too much to ask that you have an alternative to that system?
Yeah, I have several alternatives that we can try out and see if they work, right? And if they don't work, what's really important is that we don't go, well, then we should just set up a hierarchical system to just fucking...
Well, no, that's the issue, Vivian. What if all of your ideas are shit? Unironically, what if all of your ideas are trash? Let's say
what if all of yours are?
No, then I would concede and swap my positions on many of my... I wouldn't say...
Okay, cool,
hold on.
same.
But no. But the difference is my philosophies would have to change. You're saying that, like, your philosophies are going to stay stagnant. What I'm saying is that your philosophy on not wanting money or capital around, what if all other alternatives to capital are shit? And I need a moral prescription from you so that way I can talk about it, so that way I can target it with arguments.
Okay, if all other alternatives to the private ownership of the means of production are shit, right, then I guess I would become a capitalist. I don't think that that's the case.
Okay.
And that's what I'm arguing.
So what? So then,
kind of
and how we... No, and that's absolutely not, because how we analyze that begins, what is one of your prescriptions for getting rid of money? So that way I can talk about the reasons why it's not that great. But the problem is, every time I do this, you say, well, my system doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not making the argument that your system has to be perfect, but when you can't describe me how taxes work, I think that's a little bit far from perfect, a little bit far from how are we going to count seashells, to whether or not fundamentally there is a taxation system inside of our country.
Because
that's
as
a
I've
pretty
said
big
multiple
deal.
times, the conflict here is you're viewing anarchism as a proposal for a specific society, and it's
Sure, 100.
not. It's
I
a
took a
moral
big
and
shit.
political philosophy.